VIP card. We have a new thing called the U Club, so anyone who's between the ages of 18 and 25, they can get a discounted E-Club, so VIP card and handicap through us. So if you know anyone who might be interested in that, all that information is back there, so definitely check that out before you head out of here tonight. My name is Amanda Braun. I am a tournament manager at the Virginia State Golf Association. I primarily run all of our women's events, but also help out at men's qualifiers and championships. And one days. So if you play in any of our events, I may have seen you before. If not, come on out, see what we're about, and hopefully I see you at something this year. So without further ado, I have a few more announcements. So the Players Edition, as I mentioned, are kind of the books that you want to keep in your bag. If anyone's a really big rules person or wants to really dive deep down into the rules, we have the official guide. So it's a little bit thicker, as you can see, but it has the full rules, it has full interpretations, it has committee procedures, example local rules. We are selling them for $25, so if you're again really into the rules or just really want something to put you to sleep at night, come check me out after and we can get you one of these awesome officials guides. And then lastly, before I get started, I am going to hand out a sign-in sheet. I'm sure you're all members of here, obviously, so you're members of the Vsga, but I just want to make sure that we have your great contact information back in our database. So it is optional. If you really don't want to put your information down, don't feel like you have to, but I am going to pass that around, starting over here.
If you already know where your mailing list, you don't have to fill it out.
Not if you don't want to.
I just want 2 emails.
You won't get 2 emails. All right, and so without further ado, I like to start off with a cute little video to kind of get us in the spirit of learning about the rules of golf. So we'll start with that.
Dennis, what a jerk! I'm never playing golf with him again.
Who? Gennison?
Steve Gennison.
Why does that name sound so familiar?
He used to be a baseball player.
Oh, how did you end up playing golf?
Well, I met him on the course a couple of years ago. Yeah, played with him a lot. But today was it. We're on the 15th hole. Yeah, he's beating me by a couple of strokes. Then he's about to hit his second shot when he picks up the ball and cleans it.
So what?
Sorry. But the rules clearly state that you cannot clean the ball unless it's on the green. The rules are very clear about that. Certainly are. Yeah, so I paralyzed him a stroke. Ah, so what happened? He lost it. He almost came to blows. We're like face to face, like a manager and an umpire, you know what I'm talking
I still don't see what the big deal is.
Hey, a rule is a rule. And let's face it, without rules, there's chaos.
So that's why we're all here today, so you don't run into any of these issues while on the golf course. But was the sound okay? Can you all hear the videos? Can you all hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Perfect. So there are a lot of videos that we'll watch throughout the presentation that the USGA came out with. But first off, before we get to those videos, where we would start when we talk about the rules of golf is the definitions. The definitions were used to be in the front of the book. They've moved them to the back of the book, but they're still just as important as before because you'll see a lot more definitions that are put into the new rules of golf, and you need to understand the definitions because those are the words that are used in the rules. So you need to really fully understand the definitions before you can truly understand what the rules are trying to teach you. So these are some of the new definitions that the USGA and RNA have put into the new rules of golf. So a ball marker, we all know what a ball marker is, but it wasn't defined before. Now it's defined in the rules of golf. You can point to it if you need to, it's there. A boundary object is now defined too. Maybe it's not a bound stake, maybe it's a fence, but it's defined in the rules of golf. Conditions affecting the stroke. So this is one definition, but it kind of has 5 parts to it. So the conditions affecting the stroke are the lie of the ball, area of intended swing, the line of play, your relief area. So you have a bunch of different things covered in one definition. So that term comes up a few times throughout the rules, and that's kind of what it's referring to. And then you have other things that we know what they are, but they're now defined Drop, embedded, improve, lie, and mark, all things we know before. Again, they weren't defined before. They may have been defined throughout the rules, but now you can go to one spot and find all these things and really look at what they mean. Natural forces is a new term that we haven't seen before. Natural forces refers to things like gravity, rain, wind, things that are natural. They're found in nature. And one example you see that come in up in the rules of golf is maybe how does your ball move? It could be caused by a natural force. So that's just one example of where you would see it. A no-play zone, that's another new term. But we know what environmentally sensitive areas are. Areas that were before, areas that we didn't want people to go into, even look for a ball or play a ball from. So they've created this term called no-play zone, where committees or golf courses can now make areas of the course where they don't want you going into to search for a ball, play for a ball, or play a ball from there. And they have the ability to make them either normal course conditions, where it's free relief if you go in there, or as a penalty area where you will be penalized one stroke for hitting your ball into there. So that's something that really the courses have the discretion of doing now. And then reference point and relief area, those are two terms that we're going to talk about a little bit further on in the presentation when we talk about penalty areas and taking relief. So now in the rules of golf, you're always going to have a reference point and you're always going to have a relief area, no matter what you're taking relief from. So we'll kind of come back to that in a little bit when we talk about penalty areas. And then again, modified and renamed definitions. So one thing that we really see with the new rules and when you start to read the book is that it's a lot easier to understand. So we see these things that they've kind of renamed to make them make sense. So a normal course condition, that's one term now, but it covers abnormal ground conditions, which could be ground under repair, temporary water, things like that. But they've now lumped in immovable obstructions all into one rule and under one umbrella of abnormal course conditions because you're taking relief from them the same way. So instead of going to find two different spots in the book, they're now in one spot, you go to one rule and you can figure out what you have to do, and it's the same thing for either of those things. A penalty area, this is probably one of the biggest changes. Hazards are no longer a thing in the rules of golf. So I know it's hard to not say hazards, and I'm sure we're going to all say it at some point in time, including me at maybe one point, but they're not existent in the rules anymore. They're now all penalty areas, treated similar to how hazards were before, but just renamed. General object, again, a renamed part of the course. Generally, it's going to be where you play the ball from, whether it's the rough, the fairway. That's the general area where you're generally going to be playing the ball from. Integral object, it's the same thing, it's an integral part of the course. Again, easier to say. This could be maybe some big stones or something put in place by the golf course to make you maneuver. So something that you don't get free relief from. Outside influence is the same thing as an outside agency. A round is now just a round. It used to be a stipulated round. Stipulated is a pretty confusing word. I don't think anyone really understood it, so they took that away. It's now just a round of golf. The teeing area is the same thing as the teeing ground. Temporary water is the same thing as casual water. Again, makes sense. So temporary, that water is not always there, whether it's big puddles, an area that might not always hold water, it's temporary. It's now called temporary water. And then a wrong green is the same thing as a wrong putting green. They just shortened it and made it easier to say. So the 5 areas of the golf course. This is really important when you have a ruling to figure out where you are. Because different rules, you might treat them differently depending on where you are in the golf course. So we all start off at the teeing area, and that's the teeing area of the hole that we're playing, and it's a defined part of the course. It's not the whole area that might be mowed to tee height, or all the areas on the golf course that are mowed to tee height. It's very specific for each person, and there's only one teeing area on the hole that you're playing. So how do you find that area? You take your tee markers, you go 2 club lengths back, and you get a rectangle. And that rectangle becomes your defined teeing area for that hole. So when we talk about that, it's not every single area mowed to tee height. It's very specific to you. And it could be different for each person depending on what tees we're playing. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about the rules. Bunkers, They were before kind of lumped in with hazards, but they're now their own thing. They're treated differently a lot of the time, so they've decided to make them their own part of the course. Bunkers are just areas of sand, as we all know. Penalty areas, again, we talked about it, we'll talk about it more, but they can still be marked as red and yellow, and we'll talk about what they are more, what can be marked as penalty areas, and how to take relief from those later on in the presentation. The putting green, again, the putting green of the hole that's being played, not all putting greens. And then everything else is the general area. Fairway, rough, maybe different tees that are not your defined tee, and wrong putting greens are also under that umbrella of general area. So one thing we see with the new rules is that they really promote faster pace of play. So some of the ways they do this is our first infographic that you have, but there's a lot of different ways, and we'll go through some of them and how they really helped with speeding up pace of play. So we'll watch this video here and then talk about it, and really the first thing that they really did to help with pace of play.
It is important that you are aware of how your pace of play impacts others. The 2019 rules encourage prompt pace of play by all players, by recommending that you play promptly throughout the round, such as by preparing in advance for each stroke, moving at a good pace between strokes and between holes, and that you make a stroke in no more than 40 seconds.
40 seconds. They've now put a time to it and how long it should take you to make a stroke. And the rules say that you have 40 seconds to make your stroke, but a lot of the time, or hopefully most of the time, you don't take that whole 40 seconds. So how do we make sure we keep under that 40 seconds? There's some things you can do. You can do things around your ball while someone else is playing, such as move loose impediments, maybe shoot your range, find out what club you want to use, take a few practice swings, as long as it's not disrupting to whoever's playing. And that helps you save time. So once that person plays and it's your turn to play, maybe you take another practice swing or two and then you're ready to go. 10 seconds at most. That 40 seconds starts when it's your turn to play. So that's when you get to the ball, maybe you get up to the ball, you're the first one to play. You don't have that luxury of kind of doing things while someone else is playing, but you still have 40 seconds to figure out what club you want to use, move loose impediments, all of that. And I know 40 seconds doesn't sound like a very long time, but I challenge all of you, next time you go play golf with a friend, have them time you. From the time you get to your ball and it's your turn to play, to the time you complete your stroke, and just see how long it takes you. Because I think you'd be surprised at how long 40 seconds actually is. And maybe there's some in here who take more than 40 seconds on a regular basis. And that's something you can really work on and think about, okay, how can I improve this and get under that 40 seconds? And you'll figure out what works best for you. Or maybe you're someone who plays really fast and you aren't doing very well. You can slow down, take a little bit more time because you're not hitting that 40-second mark every time. Maybe it'll help improve your games. But I challenge you, next time you go play, have someone time you and just see how long it takes you to make that stroke when it's your turn to play. Because I think you'll be surprised at how long 40 seconds actually is. Yes, sir?
Is there a penalty with that?
Great question. So is there a penalty associated with the 40 seconds? No, there is not. So it is part of the etiquette part of this. It's more under the rules where you don't waste someone else's time, don't slow down the game, slow down people behind you. However, a committee or a golf course can put into play a pace of play policy where they could penalize essentially for it. Maybe it's a tournament. I know for us we have a policy put in place. Maybe you get a warning the first time you go over 40 seconds. Maybe you get a second warning, and then you're going to be penalized 1 stroke, 2 strokes, whatever it is. But no, just under the rules of golf, there is not a penalty associated with going over 40 seconds. Any other questions? Okay. Another thing that's really encouraged in the rules of golf now is playing ready golf. So we'll see what that means here.
The order of play when starting a hole depends on who has the honor. After that, it is based on which ball is farthest from the hole. In stroke play, however, there is no penalty for playing out of turn, and the 2019 rules both allow and encourage you to play ready golf, which means to play in a safe and responsible order that is most convenient and that saves time. These players agreed to play out of turn because the player farther from the hole had a difficult shot, and the other player was ready to play.
So we heard there, stroke play, there's no penalty for playing out of turn. It's encouraged. Playing